Still a lot to get through tonight, so let's get straight into it with my next guest, founder of Wrong Speak Publishing and another great friend of the U.S. Report, Adam B. Coleman. Now, Adam, we saw a week ago Jordan Neely, a career criminal, died in an incident on the New York City subway when a passenger named Daniel Penny, an ex-Marine, restrained him after he was harassing passengers, putting the guy in a deadly chokehold. Now, progressives tried to turn Neely into a hero when, in fact, he was a very troubled man with a long criminal rap sheet. And now, news out of New York has come that Daniel Penny will surrender to criminal charges. Adam Coleman, you are, as they say, New York adjacent. I'm concerned as an ex-New Yorker. Is the message now coming out of New York that criminals can harass innocent citizens with impunity?
I mean, by effect, it sounds like that. Defending yourself, and this goes back to that bodega worker who was attacked by a man who was trying to rob him, and he was physically assaulting him. Actually, he wasn't trying to rob him. He was assaulting him, and he was stabbed to death to defend himself. He was brought up on the charges and only dropped when public pressure came. There was a sense in New York, at least to me, it sounds like you can't defend yourself, and it's not advisable to defend other people's right to travel safely around the city. So to me, it sounds like this man put him in some sort of restraint under an agreement with everybody else. Because when I look at the images, I'm not seeing people trying to pull him off, right? Usually if someone's doing something that doesn't look right with other people that are hanging around, they're trying to separate them. They're trying to stop him. They weren't. They were actually helping to restrain him. So it's not to say that he does or doesn't deserve charges. I'm not a lawyer. It's not for me to judge, but I think there is something there when it comes to defending yourself. And will you be punished for doing so?
But Adam, there's a bigger thing too here, I think, which we've seen in New York, but we see it elsewhere in other big cities in the U.S., where the progressive left is trying to minimize this broader sort of climate of conversation that, yes, the subways are dangerous. Yes, there's a lot of really unwell people on there, who are hassling people, making life difficult. But how much of this is really, essentially rich progressive gaslighting people who need to take the subway? It seems to me, like we've spoken about before, there's a big class element to all of this.
Absolutely. There's a number of people, especially of the upper class progressives, who like to shame people for daring to wanting to get on a train and make it to where they need to make it to without being harassed. And when you complain about it, they make it seem like you're shaming these people for existing. When the reality is, the progressives want people, or they think it's their right to live in squalor. Is there some sort of point of pride for mentally ill people to live in this particular manner? And you're just supposed to shut up and accept it. And granted, I don't live in New York, but I'm right outside the city. I've been to New York City plenty of times. And because I don't live in New York, I'm not entrenched in that mentality that you should just ignore the screaming person, ignore that there's insanity that's happening a few feet away from you, and to keep it moving. And so that's why I wrote my piece criticizing that mentality that's existed in New York for quite a while, that it's all normal. This is just city stuff. It's okay that Penn Station looks like The Walking Dead. It's all good. And New Yorkers really need to temper that.
Indeed. Now let's go over to the other side of the country, to California, where a reparations task force, talking about slavery reparations, voted on the final set of recommendations to send to the state legislature, formally recommending that the state pays up to 1.2 million U.S. dollars to every qualifying black resident. Now, Adam, what do you make of this and other pushes for reparations around the U.S. at the moment?
So I have like a mini rule of my own. I generally don't talk about reparations as far as like injecting my opinion, mostly because I think reparations is an illusion. I think that it'll never happen, so talking about it is mostly pointless. But if California wants to bankrupt themselves, if they were to pass this, they would basically have 3 times their annual budget just to fulfill this. If they want to do this, then have at it. Let California bankrupt itself. But Gavin Newsom said publicly that he doesn't really support this, which is hilarious because he's the one who created this commission in the first place, and he didn't have to do this. So what he's actually trying to do is dress up, oh, we're trying to have fair, equal housing and healthcare. But that's his job. His job is to make sure that this exists. And he's trying to dress up what he's supposed to be doing, what any governor would do, as being part of reparations to get some sort of chip for it. But the reality is the Democrats never really cared about reparations. They've always used it as some sort of political ploy to dangle over Black Americans who actually want reparations over their head. And Gavin Newsom, unless he changes his mind, because of some sort of political pressure, I doubt it. But it just proves my point that they were never serious about this in the first place.
Adam Coleman, I am absolutely shocked at your cynicism. The idea that Democrats and progressives could be hypocrites using minority groups for their own political gains. I don't know. I'm going to need to lie down to process this. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time here on the U.S. Report. Now, we've still got a lot of fun to come, including an Only in America You Can't Miss. But before we go to the break, let's enjoy the childhood reminiscences of one Kamala Harris. Here, the vice president gives us a little insight into her childhood, insight which could explain so very much about what has happened in the years and decades since, and even her thought processes today.
Everything is in context. My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
That explains it. She was dropped out of a coconut tree. And here I thought she was just stoned to the bejesus bell.